While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but because they were born to honor the thin blue line. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast, and today I am in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Did I say that in the right way?
Yes, you did.
I did. And as you all know, part of the LEO First Podcast is in-person podcasting. Now, you're going to hear the word podcast a lot in the beginning just because we do a lot of winging and try to have fun. But one of the joys of having a podcast is it gives me the opportunity to come around to different countries, different states in the U.S., different environments. And it just allows to show that in law enforcement, whether you're in the industry, retired, thinking about it, you're a vendor supporting it, it shows that we're just people. And one of the cool things about today's podcast in Australia is that I'm actually in my Airbnb. One of the benefits to traveling and I think trying to explore the city without necessarily being in a hotel is finding Airbnbs like this. Finding a place where you can have a living room, a kitchen, your own bathrooms, and it's spacious. If you check out my Instagram, you'll kind of see that the background, I think we're on the 14th floor, but all these high rises and just the setting in itself makes such an amazing difference. Now, let me stop rambling because I'll talk about this whole Airbnb. I'm not promoting them. I'm not endorsed by them yet. Maybe somebody in Airbnb sees they're like, hey, we want to put Michael Laidler as their new image. But whatever it is, I always say find a rental or find a place that's not a hotel so it gives you the chance to kind of have some space and enjoy yourself. But today we have a special guest. And I think based on what he and I talked about in the green room prior to the show, you're going to be very thrilled and you're going to be excited that his background in law enforcement up to this point affects us everywhere. And sometimes when it comes to communication, reading body languages, understanding how people just function, whether they're in a law enforcement setting or out, it could be applied everywhere. And I know for me, just talking to him, it's been very refreshing. It's also been educating because he done educated me today about studies that I'm probably going to use in my future keynote presentations just because I think it's so valuable just as a person to know some of these things. So today we have Lee Wolahan with us. He has over 23 years of law enforcement in the country of Australia, 13 years as a police negotiator, and some of the things that he's done up to this point in his career has been game-changing. And I know he'll get a chance to tell you some of those things that he's working on and things that he's really enjoyed about being in this industry. He was on a podcast, and I do have the note. Don't tell me, Lee, because I took it down, because you're going to get a whole bunch of chance to talk. He was on a podcast before called Police Life, The Experts, and the title of it was Negotiators. So if you hadn't have a chance, you can find that on Spotify. You sent me the link about that today. I was told check it out, and it'll give you another perspective if you even want to know more about him from a different angle versus this podcast. But as you all know, part of the LEO First Podcast is highlighting law enforcement officers, highlighting this industry, because I always want to humanize the badge. I always want to show that at the end of the day, we're people. You go to the grocery store, you're a person. You go to the doctor, you're a person. You're going to your kid's recital, you're just a person. But that uniform is heavy. Whether it's polyester, cotton, whatever tactical new material they try to give us, fire resistant, it is very heavy, but we still have things that go on, and we still have families. We are married, divorced, kids, whatever you want to look at. And with that said, it allows each of us to have the opportunity to just see people from different walks of life. And obviously, this is a very different walk of life. I was telling Lee before we started that this is my first time south of the equator. So being in Australia, and for all my people back in the US, you know that right now it gets dark at like 5 o'clock at night. It didn't get dark until like 9 o'clock last night. I was very confused because right now we're ready to go to bed in like an hour at like 6 o'clock. Last night, when myself and my friend Tim, we were at the Australian Open, it hit 9 o'clock at night and we were like, it's just getting dark out. So that was kind of interesting when it comes to like the positioning of this country and just how this continent lies. So I will tell you, if you haven't been to Australia yet, it's on my list to come back probably next year with my buddy Jason to do another Australian Open. But this country, especially Melbourne, the first place I've been at here, has been really nice. It's been, I did get stopped by Border Force when I got here, which was a different experience. It was cool, and we might get in that. If not, you can just message me offline. I can tell you it was a fun experience. I didn't get strip searched, or they didn't take me to the back room, and there was no digital checks. And if you don't know what that means, go look it up. There was nothing like that. But it was kind of cool to see the level of security and some of the things that are being done to ensure that whoever comes in this country, whether they look like law enforcement or they look like the worst person in this world, that safety is important in security. So I'm rambling enough. I told them I'll only ramble for like 2 or 3 minutes. I don't know what we're at right now, but we're probably well past that. Lee, what do you want to talk about today, and what do you want to kind of get into?
Well, first off, I just want to say, Michael, thank you for having me. I've actually listened to a lot of your show. I really do enjoy listening to it because everyone grows up in a country outside of the United States looking at law enforcement from a United States perspective, because that's where the TV shows and the movies, it mostly comes from there. So we have a great understanding about, to some degree, what it's like being a law enforcement officer in that industry, whether it's prisons, sheriffs, or state or federal. And so we just wanted to highlight the similarities and some of the differences of the things that we do in different countries. I was in New York City a while ago, and I was talking to 2 police officers, and one of the police officers, she was very young, and she said, what's the food like? Do you have like American food, like cheeseburgers? And I'm not going to do the accent, but her partner says, you sound stupid when you say stuff like that. It's exactly like the States, but just slightly different, and we use centimeters. They use centimeters instead of inches, and it's very similar.
You all have an accent to us, but we have an accent to you. Everything else is the same.
Yes. So what I wanted to do is, I'm a big fan of don't be the hero of your own story. So I'm going to tell you a story of my first experience with a police negotiator and how that was formative in the way that I felt about this as a career, and did everything I could to try and get into that field. So I'm going to take you back.
Okay.
2002, Napster was one of the most popular websites. America Online was the most used trafficking platform. Nickelback was number 1.
I think we're dating ourselves right now.
Yeah,
but keep going, because there's some viewers that might be Generation Z that might be like, what is Napster?
Petrol was a quarter, or gas as you call it, was a quarter of the price. And so I was a uniformed police officer in a metropolitan police station, and we got a job for someone who was barricaded inside a room, threatening to end their own life with a knife. And so when we got there, I could hear distress on the other side of the door. I was young, I was stupid. And that my father always has a saying that if you don't look back on your old self and think that you were stupid, then it means you're still stupid.
He sounds like a very wise man.
He is. And anyway, I decided I needed to get into that room to help this poor guy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you or most of your listeners have done it, but kicking in a door is not something that I had done before, but I'd watched it on the movies. And so I leant back and I put my foot straight through the door, and then hopped on my foot for about 20 seconds until my partner could get me right. And we finally got ourselves in. So the element of surprise was gone. When I got into the room, I saw a pretty distressing sight, which is someone holding a knife to their throat with no clothes on, clearly suffering, a mental health episode. They're in crisis. And so I did I did what I tell my students, is that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the lowest and best level of training that you have. And so knife equals gun, so I pulled back then it was a Smith & Wesson K-frame 6-shoot revolver, and I pulled it out.
We're showing so much age, but keep going. Yes.
I know, and I had a Super Nintendo. That's gonna.
Oh yeah, you probably had a Sega Genesis too, probably.
And so I pulled out my firearm and I pointed at him and I just started shouting. And eventually a tactical team turned up and it felt like forever. And then the negotiator turned up, and he turned up in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. And he didn't have any kit on, and he looked different. And the tactical team were very, respectful of him. And he stepped in and he said, look at him, he's terrified. And I nodded and said, yeah. And then I felt the hand on the top of my gun, and he goes, I'm not talking about him. And he lowered my gun, and I put my gun away, and he said, this guy's scared, and so are we, so let's give him a bit of space, and let's move back, and let's bring calmness to a chaotic situation, not elevate it and escalate it in a way that is counterproductive. So from that moment, I spoke to him afterwards, and I said, I want to apologize. I really messed that up. And he said, no, you didn't. You did what you were trained to do. And he goes, you kept your faculties together enough that you did something. And indecision is a decision. And I've never forgotten that if you can't decide to do anything, that's a decision. Mm-hmm. And so from then I thought, well, I really want to be a negotiator, and I want to do what he did. And so my mum always said to me, find something that you enjoy doing and be really, really good at it. And so
your parents got a lot of good advice.
Yes. Yeah.
They seem there's a lot of wisdom in all these kinds of
Yeah, I'm very lucky. And so what I did was I found mentors, and I found people that were in the industry. And where I come from, it's very different. Our police negotiators are in the tactical team. They're part of the tactical team, and they have all the same training and the same capabilities. What that means is that our negotiating is not like most of the movies where they're in a soundproof van with lots of things going on, 200 meters, 300 meters from the suspect. It means we're front and center, either in the armored vehicle or out on foot at the front door in front of the arrest team or next to the arrest team in the tactical team. And so what that enables us to do is have face-to-face communications with our subjects, which we do 95% of the time. Right. It flips when you get to other organisations that they do everything by phone because it's safer. But the thing about safety is that sometimes you miss out on the nuance, and you miss out on the opportunity to make subconscious decisions about that person that you're talking to. You know, where are they looking? What are their hands doing? What are they sweating? Have they got rapid eye movement? Is their brain online? What is their brain state? And so what we enable to do is that when we're face to face with people, we can break down those barriers very, very quickly and get ourselves a successful outcome without using force, which is the ultimate outcome, I would believe. So I eventually got into the tactical team, and that was very tough, as a lot of your listeners would know. It was difficult, and I loved it, but there is nothing more fulfilling for me and thrilling than standing there at a siege in front of the best in the business, and everyone's watching you and listening to you, and the subject is in a position where he thinks he can outwit you. And so I got asked recently, what's it like? And I said, it's like doing stand-up comedy for the first time, but you're being heckled by someone who's on stage with you, chasing you around with a baseball bat. And so, I loved it. So 13 years as a negotiator, I now run negotiator training and negotiator training courses. And I'm part of a world-leading team of negotiators. We've got 18 of us, and we cover a great distance. If you imagine, our location is about, I would say, a tenth the size of the United States that we cover. So it's a big land.
It's a lot of coverage for 18 people.
So it's a lot of coverage. We have to be able to triage jobs well. We have to be able to determine what deserves our attention the most. But we also spend a lot of time upskilling detectives and specialist units, because what we have to teach is no secret. It's be truthful, be kind, be empathetic, but also be able to influence and change behaviors as you go.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about when you talked about like upskilling, like the non-negotiators or the people that are earning the unit, is when you do that, it makes your job more efficient when you do have to get the scene, because if they know some of the expectations, they could be removing those already. So it's like you're almost just coming into the game versus trying to start the game all over. Last thing you want is, like you said, that person that's there before you to be escalating that person's anxiety or that kind of fear that they have, whatever it is, versus like, no, let me teach and uptrain some of these people. So when I get there, I'm like, okay, have we done X, Y, and Z already? And that person that was there before, you can say, Lee, we did it all. We tried everything, or this is where we're at. So it makes it a little bit more effective when you guys do get on scene.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. So one of the things that I say in my teachings with detectives in uniform is don't lie, which sounds very simple, but police lie to people all the time.
So, actually, I don't know what it was when you came through, but that's one of the things that they kind of trained us. They said, hey, we're at least in the U.S., I know there's case law and Supreme Court like law for us that says if you got to lie to somebody to get, obviously, the answer that you're looking for the legal right, they say lie to people. Hey, tell them whatever they want to hear. But as we've got more wise, that if it catches up to us.
Exactly. So, for example, I say when we get to a job, we'll be given the entire history of that person, and we'll be told exactly what they're going to be arrested for or taken into some sort of care for a mental health episode. So we say, when we get on scene, we listen to the person who is being unsuccessful. So that might be a sergeant or a supervisor or a detective.
Because you're there for a reason. So obviously, if you're there, like you said, and I want people to understand that part, by the time your unit gets there, that means that somebody else wasn't successful.
Yes.
And you're not just coming because you just want to show up because you want to be everywhere. It's because you're there now. There's a reason why you're there. It ain't like whoever your chain of command just say, hey, guess what, Lee? We just want you to go to every call like this. No, it's because someone's not winning. So when you do show up, and that I think that applies to other parts of life too. Like if you call for help, when the help gets there, let them do what they got called for.
Yes. And so when we get there, a lot of the things that I keep hearing and I'm trying to train out of people is they're there because, say for example, a hypothetical. The person has done a domestic assault, serious charges are pending, and they're going to be arrested and interviewed and perhaps taken into custody. Yeah. Unfortunately, because the person who is negotiating on the police behalf, they're stressed and they're nervous and they don't want to upset that person. They're saying things like, and I hate this, I just want to chat. And it's not true.
Yeah.
So when we get on scene, what makes us different and what makes us, I guess, more likely to be successful is we say, has anyone told you exactly why we're here and what needs to happen? Yeah. And it's kind of like opening up a window. Yes, you're going to get a reaction, but that person will then start to trust you because they haven't been told that information or they were in a position where they were unwilling to absorb that information. Yeah. And so for us, like you said, we don't get called by 000 or 911. We get called by police officers or we get called by government agencies, and we sometimes do work in prisons or anything as high as a counterterrorism event. But when we get there, someone's already been talking and they've been unsuccessful, and that can be tricky because you're tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, sorry.
Hey, tag, you're out. Yeah. You're not in.
Well, for anyone who's done breaching before or method of entry, the last thing you want to hear when you're ramming that door is change, you're out. And that's when the technique drops and the foot comes off the door and everyone starts doing some wild stuff because they don't want to be told you didn't get the chocolates, you didn't get the win.
But it's reality.
Yes.
I mean, like if we have. In law enforcement of all levels, all countries, we have specialized units for a reason. That's what they do. Like, people are like, well, I could do that too. Well, if you can, put in for it. If you can qualify, and then you can start doing it. But if that unit's called, you have to have that at least understanding that they're there for a reason.
Yes. Well, I was on a height not dissimilar to what we have here. I was on the roof of a court. Mm-hmm. And this guy's case wasn't going well and he wanted to jump. and end his own life because he was so much under pressure, and the stress response from that is, as you know, fight, flight, or freeze. And at the moment he was freezing and looking at fleeing. And the judge was negotiating. And when we got there, I said, with respect, sir, Your Honor, I'm going to take over. And he said, and he gave me the hand, the don't argue. And, he said, you're only going to make this worse. And I said, with respect, sir, when I walk into your courtroom, I said, you're in charge. I will give you the respect and
that's what you specialize in,
that you deserve.
Case law,
and you are in charge. And if I was to ever try and take charge of your courtroom, I would face pretty significant consequences, would I not? And he said, yep. And I said, well, this is now my courtroom and I'm in charge. And so with respect, you can sit and watch, but I need you to hand over control now, please. And we had a good conversation afterwards, and sometimes you need to take a step backwards, but we rebuilt that sort of relationship afterwards. But it was a kind of a satisfying thing to say to a judge.
But you're not there to make friends, like in that manner.
No, you're right.
You're there to get a result, and that result is usually to save somebody's life.
Yes.
So you're going to step on somebody's shoes. It's just what it's like leadership. Like if you're called to come handle something as a leader, once you're there, you're there. Like, I'm not trying to make a friend with that person right now that I'm taking over, because I'm here to get a result. And my result is to save a life. That is my number one thing. So you said something, and we talked about it in the green room, and I wanted to make sure we brought it up because I think it's very important for our viewers to know. And I know you were excited about it because I can tell you do research and data. Like, you just don't make things up like that. Like, we talked about wisdom and intelligence, and I know you're just not intelligent. You have the wisdom to go with it. You talked about a study that involves decision making. And I bring that up because you talked about the judge. The judge had a decision to make, and that was, I could keep arguing with this guy because I want to be the big dog on the scene, or I can make the decision and allow Lee to take over. So talk about that article, or talk about that study that we kind of mentioned earlier, and how people have decisions to make subconsciously that they may not know, but it's very beneficial.
Yeah, I will. But before I do, one of the bits of advice that I give freely to anybody is, if you want to win an argument, if you want to come out in top in a discussion or a negotiation, or if you're having a discussion with a subordinate or a superior, sound reasonable. Always sound reasonable, because if that person wants to continue to negate your thought processes, they have to sound unreasonable, and no one likes sounding unreasonable. And so whenever I engage with any person, like I did with that judge, be reasonable and tell people the why. This is the reason why I'm going to be more effective because I A, B, C. Yeah. And then what's your decision? And then you'll find that if you give them the why and you sound reasonable, and then ask them to make a decision, no one likes to sound unreasonable, and they will more often than not, give into what it is that you want. So I will talk about the study now, but I firmly believe that we need to look more heavily into presence and what constitutes presence in law enforcement. And
make sure you talk about that story too. That was a good story you had.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like the story we talked about earlier. That was good, because it made me think a lot. I was like, how many of us have those stories where I want to take away from you, because it was a good story. I really liked the story.
So I firmly believe that for every problem that you face, there is a practical solution and there is a psychological solution. And so I'll give you an example. There was they wanted to spend $7 billion making a European rail 10 minutes faster. $7 billion. One of their very clever people spent $5 million introducing free Wi-Fi, which made the time seem a lot shorter. And so it was a psychological solution instead of a practical solution. And I believe that in law enforcement, we need to start looking at those psychological solutions instead of just constantly looking for a practical solution. And I'll give you an example. There was a very famous serial killer in America, Ted Bundy, killed north of 20 people.
The bad part about what you're about to say, so Ted Bundy, I went to Florida State University.
All right.
So my undergraduate degree is actually in Florida, at Florida State. So I heard a lot about Ted Bundy. And I used to study criminal justice when I first started college, but I'm switched to a business degree. But He did some damage at Florida State during. So you're talking about Ted Bundy.
We've all got those skeletons in our closet. Yeah. But when he was arrested, he went through the legal process and defended defended his actions and said he was innocent. But eventually, when he was banged to rights, he admitted to what he did. Mm-hmm. There was people lining up around the block looking to interview him to find out what made him a monster, what made him the person he is. But one of the groups that went to the front of the queue, the study that they wanted to conduct was how did he pick his victims, and how did he pick and choose people, two people walking down the street, that's my victim, that's not my victim. And so what they did was they sat down with him and said, how did you choose these people? And he said, well, it was a combination of things. It was their gait. It was the way they were unsteady on their feet, or looked at their watch, looked annoyed, went the wrong direction, and then suddenly turned around, moved away from me. Or it was a combination of about 50 different things, including clothing, including hairstyle, that when you added it all together, there was a red button in his mind, and he said, that's my victim. Mm. And so, like any psychological study, you got to test that hypothesis. So what they did was they went around in a van in New York City, and they filmed people through one-way glass.
Of course, New York City, but yes.
Yes, and so when they did, they took these, and I correct me if I'm wrong on some of the details, but the study is sound. And then what they did was they took all of those thousands of footage and then showed it to criminals. And the criminals had a red button in front of them. And then what they would do is when they saw a victim, they would hit that red button. And that's it. What they found was that the victims that they chose, and some of them were men, women, children, law enforcement, whatever, but they all had that chaos to their movement. They had an irregularity. They looked like a fish out of water, that they didn't belong, like they were flustered. And so what I teach to my students is that the work begins long before you get out of that police car. The work begins on your way to the job, and it's getting yourself in that mind state where you feel calm, you feel composed, and you're quietly confident. So when you open up that door, you're not carrying a bunch of stuff. You're not going back to the car to check it 3 times, because the human brain, no matter how much drugs you're on or how much mental health you are suffering from, it is a supercomputer, and it is making complex decisions. The brain makes 90,000 decisions a day, and most of those are subconscious. So what I teach my students, and what I encourage your audience to think about, is what messages are you sending when you walk down the street? What messages are you sending to the suspect when you're writing their name down but your hand is shaking, or you've raised your voice, or suddenly now you're heightened, or you're angry? And these are things that we can rectify very, very easily with a little bit of awareness and a little bit of training, and that's something that I've focused on in the last couple of years. But to your point, I was saying to you in the green room before that I was walking down the street in a bad neighborhood with my then girlfriend, now beautiful wife, and
if she's gonna watch this, she's gonna appreciate that.
Amazing.
Yeah,
cheekbones to die for. She's very smart.
We'll mark that. That'd probably be like looking at my watch. That might be like around the 21-minute mark. So you could let her hey babe, you're on a 21 minute.
Yeah.
Just watch it. I don't know what's going on, but Mike said watch this part of the podcast.
I love you, Rowena. Yes. And anyway, we were walking down the street in a bad neighborhood, but good food.
Correct.
And I saw someone who has been in and out of trouble. I could just tell, as most of your audience would know. Anyway, I did what I normally did and just walked past him. That's it. And then as I walked past, he gave me a sideways eyes and he said, "G'day, boss," and then kept walking. And my wife said to me, "Well, how did he know you're a police officer?" And I said, "Let me go check." So I said, "Oh, excuse me, mate." And he said, "Yes, boss." And I said, "Can I ask you a question? How did you know I was law enforcement?" And he said, "Oh, I'll have to have a think about it. But I think it was the way you were standing. Everyone else doesn't make eye contact with me. You made eye contact." He goes, "You put your phone away as you were walking past me, your shoes, your watch, your haircut." And I'm just going, "Oh my goodness."
You're like, I did all of that.
Like, I did all of
my
that.
viewers right now are probably thinking, I just did this 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. And And he kept going, and he was really, he was quite articulate about it. And then he said, well, how did you know I'd been inside prison? And I said, well, and I didn't tell him the truth, which is, you know, the sunken cheeks and the fact that he's got nothing in his hands, and he's sizing everyone up, and the shoes and the bag around there. But I didn't. I just said, oh, look, probably the same sort of things. I said, you've got your hands out of your pocket, you're walking with confidence. And he was pretty chuffed, and we went our separate ways. But it was exactly what the study on Ted Bundy was talking about, which is there is a presence to everybody, and we let out signals when we get out of a vehicle, when we rock up to a scene, and I'm big on that. Your image, your perception, how people look at you is very important. If I had known that we were going to be doing this with cameras, I wouldn't have worn shorts, for example.
The viewers know, hey, we show up. Hey, you know why? You know why you got shorts on? Because you're a human, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You got to pull apart. You're like, hey, trust me. Hey, but see, so on that note, I'm happy you said that. I'm happy you're wearing shorts. I'm happy you're comfortable, because what ends up happening, and obviously, look what I mean. I'm wearing a t-shirt, jeans. I mean, people see me at my failure. I mean, earlier, I don't know if when I edited, people are going to see I have on these bright, I guess I'll just show these bright neon green Brooks. Like, this is what we do. Like, we're not always in a uniform. We don't always have tactical clothes on. We don't have an extra 80 pounds of gear on. We don't have Kevlar shields. Like, we don't always, or Kevlar helmets. We don't always have that. So with that, how do you, and I want to highlight this, because one thing we talked about resilience, we talked about earlier. How do you purposely make that balance between law enforcement and actually spending time with your wife and having an outside life? Like, what are you doing here nowadays with your wisdom to make sure you can create a balance?
Well, I'll actually take it back, because I listened to a lot of your show, and at one stage you said, I don't like going with your rank, because that's not who you are. Correct.
Nowadays, it took me a while. I don't even call people by their, because in law enforcement, gosh, we're so military. We're so bad about using last names and only knowing people's last names.
Yeah, go to a Christmas party. This is, Paul?
This is Wolahan and Laidler.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's his first name. You're like, oh, I don't even know what his first name is. I've been calling him Wolahan for the last 10 years.
Yeah. It took me a while, because when I went through the academy, and I think we joined law enforcement a similar time.
I was 2005.
Yeah, so I was 02,
yeah,
obviously.
So you're 3,
but
same thing.
You know, that is your brain, for a young man, your brain hasn't even formed yet. It doesn't. The human brain as a young man doesn't form fully until you're 27, and so it is a natural human thing for law enforcement to become part of who you are, and so I fell down that rabbit hole, and I started to have my orbits of my friendship groups suddenly just being police officers. And that's great. I love those people, and I love everyone I work with. I work with people way smarter than me. But that's not healthy for me in the long term, because what happens if you get suspended? What happens if you've made a mistake and those people, you know, for obvious reasons, aren't supposed to talk to you during that period? Like, you need to have a fully rounded group of friends. And so that's why I consciously make time for people who aren't police officers and aren't in law enforcement. And what I do with my wife is when I've had a stressful day, I'm vulnerable. And I've lost friends to the great sickness of depression, and one of the things I can tell you about every single one of them is nobody knew. And so no one knew how they were feeling, because if you were to ask me to describe the qualities of someone who's no longer with us, I would say stoic, staunch, strong, nothing fazed them, and that's just not true. And
they were just blocking it.
Yes, and so I am very, very, I'm really interested in trying to make sure that I honor them by being vulnerable when I can. And if I've had a bad day, I tell my wife. And if I'm struggling with something, or if I'm noise sensitive, that's a tell. It's telling you, your body is telling you something. But on the flip side, going back to resilience, stress is a force. And stress is a force, but so is heat. It can heat up your food. It can keep you warm. It can also burn you.
Yeah.
So the way we got to look at stress is not every stress needs to be considered to be a bad thing. And so when you have a stress response following a critical incident, that's a normal human reaction. It's like inflammation in your shoulder. People go, oh, I got to take anti-inflammatories. No, you actually need inflammation. Yeah. It's cells rushing to that area to fix you.
Repair, yeah.
And so when you're noise sensitive after an incident, or if you can't sleep, that's your body trying to deal with it. And so don't shy away from it, or you drink it away, or you laugh it off. Like, you actually need to absorb that and realize this is kind of a stress response in my body, and I need to deal with it. So I don't take my problems home. But what I do is I communicate with my wife and let her know how I'm feeling, as opposed to downloading all the nuance of the job, because that's not going to be good for her either, because she can't control that.
And on that note, I want people to understand that, because what we think, and a lot of the podcast has been about like communication, and like I know from the negotiator side, we do a lot of reading body language, because that's where you're really getting your answers from. You go home and tell your wife, who knows you because y'all sleep in the same bed, y'all have meals together, you travel together, you do a lot of stuff together. Just because you're verbally telling her nothing's wrong with you, she sees it. So now you are lying to her for when you shouldn't. Versus just saying, hey, you know what, I had a bad day, and obviously you let them know. You have to know how much you tell her, but you're lying and saying, no, I'm fine, everything's good. I'm just gonna go sit in this dark corner by myself and drink a fifth of whiskey by myself, but I'm good. It's not helping her out. It's not helping your family out. It's not helping those non-law enforcement friends out that you have. So you have to have some level of vulnerability, because you don't want to be like those other stoic people that aren't here anymore, because they try to handle it by themselves.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And look, this job that we do, and we all know it's bonkers. It's crazy.
It is.
And you can experience something in 12 months in law enforcement that the average civilian will never experience in a lifetime. But that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
you can't get that anywhere else.
I had a guest on about a year and a half ago, Betsy Smith. Betsy Brayton or Smith. I don't want to make sure, because I know she has a maiden name in there too. And she told me she started in the 1980s. She said her first call in FTO was a double homicide.
Wow.
So you talk about 12 months. If you're in law enforcement, you don't know. I mean, anybody that's in law enforcement or had the aspiration to get into it, it's very good to know that, or understand that on your first day, you can see anything, because you don't know what you're driving into. You might think you're going to a routine cat climbing a tree, or a burglary alarm that was set off. You get there, and that actual burglary, or there might be a sexual assault. You really don't know. So you're right. There's a lot that happens in law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I spent a lot of my time now training, which is good, but I have done sieges, I've done barricades, I've done kidnappings, I've done CT related events, and I always said that when you walk into that building and you no longer feel enjoyment, it's time to do something else. And I love coming to work, and I love working for this organization, and I think there is nothing greater than that sort of civic responsibility and the duty of serving. And so when I was young, I tried to get into the army. Both my brothers did military. I got into officer training, and they rang me up and said, the doctor wants to talk to you. And I had my bags packed, and then he said, you sleepwalk? And I said, yep. He goes, do you see that could be a problem? I was like, oh yeah. And I was 17, and I said, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that would be a problem. And he was like, thanks, but no thanks. And that was kind of heartbreaking, because we're immigrants. My mum and dad, my two brothers, we emigrated from Ireland to Australia, and so I experienced this city the same way that you did 2 days ago, with a sense of wonder and loving it. And my dad said, this place has been so good to us. You need to serve in some way back, and you need to contribute. And so I ended up trying to do a bunch of different things, and I just didn't. I felt sort of imposter syndrome what I was doing, and so one of my friends who's now still in the job, but he said, "Why don't you come and join the academy?" And I said, "Well."
That's a good friend.
That's a good friend,
Yeah.
and he introduced me to my wife as well.
Oh my gosh!
Hi,
dang, I don't know if you had children. It's like you need to be somebody's godfather or something like that.
That's right. But he said, why don't you come and try it out and see what you do? And so I worked all the way through, all the different facets of this organisation, and to have the opportunity to be one of 18 people. Negotiating and specialising in that is something that I feel incredibly grateful for. And as we all know, we don't do this for the money.
No.
We do it for the experience. And again, I'm going to refer to my father, but he said, whatever you do, try not to have a boring life. He goes, because that's free.
Well, you listened to him very well on that one, Lee.
And I genuinely think that at the end of my career, even today, I have not had a boring life. And it has been thrilling, and it has been scary, and it's been exciting, and it's been sad, and it's been so enjoyable and fun. But I have not had a boring life, and I owe all of that and more to working in law enforcement. And I think the work that you do, and your book and all the sort of highlights that you shine on the work that we all do is absolutely commendable. And I really admire what you do.
I appreciate it. And I could tell when I speak to people from certain organizations how good their organization is because, for example, you're sitting here talking about it. And some people, they shy away for whatever reason, whether it's politics or maybe sometimes the organization has a fear. But a lot of our organizations are actually really good in law enforcement. Like, people don't realize it, and maybe they don't, but it's cool when you've been in anything for 23 years. Like, I tell people that's not something that just happens. Even law enforcement, being in it for 5 years, a year, like, it's a testament to that organization or those agencies out there that are like, how do I build my organization? How do I recruit, retain? I said, well, you find your people that have 20 plus years in, and even if they seem disgruntled, they're still there. Like, they're there for a reason, because outside of the military, every other thing, you can leave any day you want. So there's always something drawing us back to where we're at. And I'm happy you highlighted that, and you were able to say, like, hey, my organization is actually really good. Like, it's giving me the lifestyle I want. So with that said, with that in mind, if people are looking to find you, Lee, where's the best place or places?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not like you. I'm not an author or anything like that. I'm still an operational police officer. And so, I'm on LinkedIn, and I did a podcast with our organisation called Police Life, The Experts, and we did an episode, the pilot episode, which is called The Negotiators. And so my friend and colleague Matilda and I, we feature on that episode, and we talk about some of the things we talked about today. And there's a pretty interesting job where we had 2 jobs running concurrently at the same incident. That we discussed it. But the great thing about the podcast is it gives you an idea about all the different aspects of law enforcement in this place that I call home, which is Australia, which is a wonderful place. And
I see that.
I encourage anyone to visit it, because I read Dr. Kevin Gilmartin's book called, I think it was
Emotional Survival.
Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. And he was speaking to, I think it was 1,000 police officers in America. And he said, put up your hand if you've ever been to Australia, because he does a lot of work in both countries. And he said about 60 hands went up. And he goes, now put down your hand if the visit didn't include you visiting a military base. And I think there was 1 or 2 hands left. And he said when he went to Australia, and I was there was about 1,000 police officers. And he said, put your hand up if you've been to America. Every single hand went up. And I encourage Americans to come and visit this country, because we're not only allies, but we are very similar in our values, and I think there's a lot to learn from broadening your horizons. And if you're ever in town, reach out and
I will. You want to talk, Lee? You know me, and I mentioned it earlier. The only difference is that you have an Australian accent, I have an English or American accent. Everything else is the same.
Yes.
And I went to Serbia, and if Ivan Guduric is watching this show, he said the same thing about his country. Like, hey, we're not that. We're the biggest difference is some of the other countries you go to, it's language and maybe food, but law enforcement, we're all here to protect and serve.
Yes.
We're all here to save lives. We're all here to be bigger than what a uniform is, because we know we're not doing it for money. We're doing it because we actually we enjoy what we do. So for like my viewers and the people that are like, well, Australia's kind of far away, like from, I think right now from Texas where I live full time, it's like 17 hours in the past. So while we're on like a Friday, it's a Thursday there. Only difference is the time change. That's it on that part. But I agree. Australia is a place that I can see coming back next year. And I do recommend people come to it just in general, because why not? Why not learn about other cultures? Why not learn about other areas? Australian Open was fun. I stayed up until like 3 a.m. watching the match, which I'm not saying it doesn't happen everywhere, but it was kind of cool. And then I left and I felt very safe.
Yeah.
I caught an Uber back here to the Airbnb. I didn't have any concerns, any worries. I didn't have to walk through any crowds of people, but it was definitely something that I recommend for people that if they are kind of skeptical about Australia, to say, hey, come back, check it out.
Yeah.
Be one of those 1,000 police officers in the U.S. that can actively raise their hand and say, hey, I actually been here. I've been to Melbourne. I've been to Sydney. I've been to Brisbane. I've been somewhere because it's worth a visit. Now, with all that, what are some final words?
The final words I want to say is that the skills that you learn in communication, so understanding things like leverage, what is that person holding or doing that's stopping me from doing my job? So why are we in a negotiation? So if you're speaking to someone who has a knife, the leverage is the knife. If they're on a bridge, the height is their leverage. Understanding leverage is really important to getting someone to comply, because the opposite is what is true as what you think. So if you focus on the leverage, the person will go, oh, he wants this leverage. I'm gonna hang on to
Smart.
this. I'm going to. Whereas if you focus on something other than their leverage, you'll find that leverage becomes less and less important. And so when I'm doing a hostage situation or a kidnapping, the focus is on the person who's kind of in crisis the most, which is, our hostage taker, because they've taken something that's usually a family member or something, because that's all they've got. But they're in crisis too. And if you approach it with just release the person, just let them go, just drop the knife, just drop the gun, just do this, all you're doing is pushing them closer to that leverage. It sounds simple, but when you're under pressure and you're under stress, again, you fall to the lowest level of training you have. And so whenever I'm out on a ledge or if I'm dealing with someone, the last thing I do is get up close to them to try and take their leverage away, because that's just far too risky. It's far too dangerous. Follow the process, and time is your best friend. You don't want to hand things over to Officer Time, because you're still in charge, and Officer Time's not going to solve it for you. But all of these skills that we teach on our courses, they're applicable to your loved ones and your family. And the last thing I want to say is that your family deserves the best of you, and your loved ones deserve the best of you, because this job will be here after we're gone. And in 2050, 2060, some of your teachings and mine might be there. If we're lucky, your book will be. But if you can, your family and that time you have together is very finite. And my partner, Aaron, like a police partner, he said to me once, he said, we were driving around, he said, I spend more time with you than I do with my wife and kids.
It's real.
And I chose them.
Yeah.
I didn't choose you. He goes, there was a compliment coming on.
You're thinking about like, wait, I might
But I said,
revisit this
yeah, and I
conversation.
was like, where are you going with this, Aaron? And he said,
Aaron's
but I just want you to know that I enjoy this time. I do. I cherish it. He goes, but I want to spend as much quality time at home with my wife and kids. And I took that from him. And so, yes, we give our best at the job, but we should retain our very best for the loved ones we have, because they're all we've got, and they rely on us, and we rely on them. And be kind to people, because everyone out there in these streets below us is fighting a battle that we know nothing about. And I just encourage all of us, when you're dealing with people, speak softly, carry a big stick, but be kind.
Yeah, I agree. And the family deserves best. I think that's might be the title of this podcast when I put it out, because I think out of everything that
What about door kickers and high explosives? I thought we agreed on that.
we agreed on that. Yeah. I usually don't think about titles. Usually when I'm in the podcast, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, what makes the most sense? But the family deserves best. I think that's an important side because of everything we do. And I talk about it in all my keynotes or trainings, everything whenever I'm talking to anybody at every level, I'm like, at the end of the day, your organization's still going to be here, but your family's going to need you even more. Especially if you've given 25, 30, 40 years to this industry, you got to be giving your family the best, because they're going to be the ones that's going to take care of you at the end. Like, I know we take care of our families throughout our lives, but at some point when you're sick or you're not feeling well, the agency's just going to go, that agency's not coming to take care of you. So you got to give to them as much because it's important. So that's good. That's amazingly. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, I know you got a pool party to go to. I know you got to go live it up. One thing I want to do is make sure I gave you a copy of my book. I want to make sure I give you the right one. Okay, that says Lee in it. But just so you have a copy of Greatness Beyond the Badge, a signed copy at least. It's always something I try to share whenever I go anywhere, because my motivation behind the book was my own background in law enforcement. And I wanted to see not just law enforcement, but people in general understand how to have a better life, how to be self-aware, how to create margin, how to realize that whatever organization you're working for, whether it's one with a uniform or one behind a desk, even if it's your own, remember that you still got to be a person. You still got to build yourself each and every day. And I try to give as many books away as I can. Obviously, I sell them as well, but when people are on the podcast, especially in person, I'm like, hey, I got a book for you, just so you know.
No, thank you.
But it's important because that's the highlight of what we are. I remember when I thought about writing a book, it was back in 2022. That's when I actually published it. But prior to that, one thing I saw in law enforcement was how much the stress was taking us out. Not the bad guys, not the criminals, not the crooks. It was our own mental mindset that was hurting us. So I was like, what can I do? And I had 17 years, 16 years in at the time. I'm like, what wisdom can I pass on? And that's what that book's about. Just what can we do right now, today, to kind of take back our lives? And when we're going through those depressive moments and those hard days, we're going to go through it, because we can't win every battle out there. We can't save every life, although we want to. And those lives, it's not about, and I know you can speak on this even more than I can, it's not about the lives you do save, it's about the ones you don't.
Yes.
Those are the ones that stick in your mind. You could say you saved 100 lives in your 13 years as a negotiator, but that one that you did is that one that's going to hurt you. The goal with the book is be prepared for that, but also understand that there's more out there to you. So don't let your mind slip away into that dark zone. So that's all. I usually don't explain the book like that on here, but as I was thinking about it, got me excited in my head. And a lot of things we've talked about, especially with you, because you're one of the few people I've talked to that actively do negotiation, especially for the life-saving measures that you do. But it's so much about communication and understanding not just that person, but yourself, because you bring the wrong energy to negotiation and you become the problem, not the solution. And you don't want that. And that's anything in life. You always want to go to every situation as much as you can as a solution, because if you're going to be the problem, it just makes things worse. So that was my little tidbits at the end, just to add to what you're saying. But folks, I know you love this episode. I know hopefully the whole country or the whole continent of Australia watches this podcast. at least here in Melbourne and Victoria. That's always the goal. But regardless, I know you all, I would say, if you haven't reached out to Lee, if you don't have him on your LinkedIn, which you probably don't. I mean, if you're one of my followers, you may not have him yet, but I highly recommend following him and reaching out. And just, if you decide to come to Australia, you got a perfect person that can tell you about it. Because trust me, they welcomed me, him and Sean, with open hands. And I appreciate that, because that's the kind of value that I think law enforcement has, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, to say, hey, we all know what we're going through. Let's share and let's give each other the opportunity to succeed and grow. So once again, everybody, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification, however you're watching this. Make sure you share this episode. Make sure you understand the greatness that's also going on here in Australia, and obviously the greatness that goes on with you. I hope you all be safe. You have a good day. And if you need anything, reach out. If not, enjoy the rest of your moment.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge, The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaellaidler.com and hit the website at michaellaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Find vehicle is driving in